Can you elaborate on the many ways in which the FDA restricts the market functions of U.S. healthcare and interferes with every decision we make in healthcare realm? Yeah, I mean, the FDA is responsible for drugs, for medical devices, and to some extent for medical procedures, including whether you can use your own stem cells to inject back into your own body, which stem cells are allowed and which are not. And in every one of those, the FDA restricts innovation, makes it unbelievably expensive to innovate, makes it amazingly expensive to bring a drug to market, reduces the incentive for drug companies to even try. In certain areas of medicine, they generally have an attitude of, we just won't approve drugs in these areas. For example, life extension. Life extension research is probably being set back by 30 years, over the last 30 years, by the fact that the FDA just won't consider drugs whose main purpose is life extension. The only, lifestyle enhancing drugs they will consider are things that have to do with sex. What do you call the drug that for men, the blue pill, I guess? What's it called? This is me getting old. Anyway, Viagra. So they approve drugs like Viagra, but they won't approve drugs that actually that in other ways enhance human life. They don't approve drugs that extend human life. So people don't research it. So people don't invest huge amounts of money. So VCs don't invest in those companies. So it's real. And of course, medical devices, the same thing. So there are whole areas in which there would be innovation in that nobody is investing in. So it's the unseen. It goes back to Henry Hazlitt. Economics is the science of the unseen. And the unseen when it comes to the FDA is all the things we don't have. All the areas that we're not invested in. All the products, procedures, and drugs that nobody did and nobody tried and nobody engaged in because they knew there's no point. And then all the dollars wasted on stuff that then the FDA didn't permit, and then the drugs that they withdraw from the market. I mean, I think the most famous one is Vioxx, or the most recent one is Vioxx. Vioxx was a drug that for many people who had arthritis, severe cases of arthritis, was the only drug that actually, reduced the pain and made it possible for them to live with the pain. All the other drugs had side effects and didn't work and just were horrible. And Vioxx worked. But it turns out that for a small percentage of the population of people who took Vioxx, suffered from an increase in the possibility of getting heart disease. A small percentage of the people who took Vioxx got heart disease. It made the heart disease worse, I guess. Or made it more, potentially, that they would get more heart disease. Now, in a rational world, that information would be published. Doctors and patients would know that. Doctors whose patients were susceptible to heart disease would take their patients off Vioxx, or at least have a conversation with the patient. Everybody else, the doctor would say, look, you're on Vioxx, here are the risks. This is how I assess the risks. It's your decision whether you want to take Vioxx or not and take the risk or not. It reduces your pain, but you're increasing your risk by X amount of percent. But given that you're not susceptible to heart disease, it's probably not a big deal. And people would have made decisions for themselves. This is, again, the point I've been trying to make all evening. Socialism destroys or takes out of the realm individual decision-making. But that's what life is about. It's about you choosing the values you pursue, not somebody else choosing them for you. You making decisions about what kind of drugs you take with your doctor. With your doctor. Or not. You want to kill yourself, do it without your doctor. But it's your life. You make decisions. Socialism says you don't get to make decisions for yourself. Socialism rejects the idea of individual decision making in a marketplace. And FDA is a socialist institution in that sense, and it's killed millions of people because of the drugs we don't have. Not to mention, this is being changed a little bit recently under Trump, is that in some cases, drug companies now will be able to give experimental drugs to patients who are dying anyway. In some cases, dying anyway. I mean, why was this ever a question? And why not always? Why not leave it to the doctor and the drug company and the patient? They're dying anyway? But that's the kind of control over the human mind and over human decision-making and over human action that the socialist wants to have.
When you say that society has no responsibility here, I think individuals have a responsibility to themselves. Is that it?
I don't like the word responsibility involved here.
All right, well, what should we say then? Help me. Do what I wish to do. Is that your point? That the more...
No. Do what I rationally think is right, according to the right morality. And help others if you can, but not as a primary obligation. And now, in regard to society, there is no such thing as society, It's all of us. Now, how can we have obligations which we didn't undertake? See, the parents of a child would have obligations for him up to a certain age, since they brought him into the world, but they can't do what is impossible to them. So it doesn't mean that they can at any moment throw the burden on the rest of us. We're society, everybody's society, and we can't have unearned obligations and unchosen obligations.
What in the Ayn Rand civil context would be appropriate societal measures to accommodate the ungifted?
Their own parents, and a chance to give their parents to earn money. If, however, their parents are poor and cannot assume it, it's a big, heavy burden, then you can appeal to private charity, as it was always done before welfare statism in this country.
You want private charity as well for the gifted?
If necessary. They usually, in a free society, they won't need it. They'll make their own way, just so you don't stop them. But private charity cannot be done by means of tax collection, which means by force. Private charity is up to you, and if it's a worthy cause, that is, let's say, a subnormal child who certainly cannot help it, it's perfectly all right to help him, but not at the sacrifice of your own child.
You probably like to get rid of HEW then?
Oh, certainly. Oh, certainly. Much more than that. I'd like to get rid of.
A lot of the government, huh?
Everything except the basic duties of the government, which is police, law courts, armed forces.
You want less government? All right.
Thank you.
Well, everybody says that. It's a little hard to put that into effect when we've got a country that has such a maldistribution of wealth. You give me that, huh? Too few rich, too many poor.
I will give you part of that, because if there is a maldistribution, it's to those who have political pull. If some of your money is made with government help and government favoritism, then I grant you that is unfair and improper and unjust. But if you made it yourself in free competition, enough people want to pay you for your services or your product, then you should keep all of it. Why shouldn't you? You made it.
All right. Okay. You also think if the Middle Eastern countries want to hold us up for the oil at $5 a barrel, or a gallon, excuse me, $5, will that day ever be back? They ought to be able to do it. It's their oil. Is that your point?
No. My point is we should not have permitted altruistically to all those nations to nationalize what we built for them. They took... Because we are now moving towards complete collectivism or socialism, a system under which everybody is enslaved to everybody, And we are moving that way only because of our altruist morality.
Yes, but you say everybody is enslaved to everybody, yet this came about democratically, Hein. Free people in a free country voted for this kind of government, wanted this kind of legislation. Do you object to the democratic process?
I object to the idea that people have the right to vote on everything. The traditional American system was a system based on the idea that majority will prevailed only in public or political affairs, and that it was limited by inalienable individual rights. Therefore, I do not believe that a majority can vote a man's life or property or freedom away from him. And therefore, I do not believe that if a majority votes on any issue, that this makes the issue right. It doesn't.
All right, then how do we arrive at action? How should we arrive at action?
By voluntary consent, voluntary cooperation of free men, unforced officials. The powers of government are strictly limited. They will have no right to initiate force or compulsion against any citizen except a criminal. Those who have initiated force will be punished by force, and that is the only proper function of government. What we would not permit is the government to initiate force against people who have hurt no one, who have not forced anyone. We would not give the government or the majority or any minority the right to take the life or the property of others. That was the original American system.
When you say take the property of others, I imagine that you're talking now about taxes.
Yes, I am.
And you believe that there should be no right by the government to tax. You believe that there should be no such thing as welfare legislation, unemployment compensation, regulation during times of stress, certain kinds of rent controls and things like that.
That's right. I'm opposed to all forms of control. I am for an absolute, laissez-faire, free, unregulated economy. Let me put it briefly. I'm for the separation of state and economics, just as we had separation of state and church, which led to peaceful coexistence among different religions after a period of religious wars. So the same applies to economics. If you separate the government from economics, if you do not regulate production and trade, you will have peaceful cooperation and harmony and justice among men.